The 80s weren't just about iconic TV hits like Knight Rider or The A-Team. Remember the other shows? Those gems flickered brightly with unique 80s magic before fading. Let's rediscover these forgotten series whose signals dimmed but still spark nostalgia. Ready to travel back? The greatest American hero. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. Come on, you know the tune. That theme song alone rockets us straight back, doesn't it? The greatest American hero wasn't about a slick, perfect crime fighter. It was about Ralph Hinckley or Hanley, depending on which airing you caught after the name change. A wonderfully ordinary teacher handed an extraordinary red suit by aliens. The suit granted him amazing powers, flight, super strength, invisibility, the works. The only problem? He promptly lost the instruction manual. And that simple, brilliant twist was the heart of the show. We weren't watching Superman. We were watching a guy, just like us, stumbling, crashing, literally, and generally making a heroic mess of things while trying his best. William Katt played Ralph with such endearing clumsiness, making him instantly relatable. Remember those landings? More controlled crashes than graceful arrivals. Sectaurs. Now, let's venture off-world to Symbian, a planet pulsing with a truly unique blend of sci-fi and fantasy. Small Wonder. She's a small wonder, pretty and bright with soft curly hair. Oh, Vicky. Could there be a more quintessential example of 80s sitcom oddity? Ted Lawson, a robotics engineer, creates Vicky, voice input child identicant, VICI, a robot girl designed to assist disabled children, but decides to test her out by having her live with his family as their adopted daughter. Tiffany Brissett's portrayal of Vicky was unforgettable, that deadpan monotone delivery, the literal interpretation of every idiom, the uncanny strength hidden beneath the pinafore dress. The Lawsons' constant struggle to keep Vicky's robotic nature a secret from their nosy neighbors, the Brindles, remember Harriet? Fueled endless comedic situations. It was campy, the acting could be broad, and the laugh track worked overtime, but there was an undeniable sweetness to it. We watched Vicky grapple with human emotions, learn about family, and occasionally lift the sofa with one hand. For 4 seasons, this strange little show about a robot trying to be a real girl found its audience. Picture this: the hum of the early home computer, the promise of a digital frontier just beginning to unfold. That's where Automan blinked into existence, didn't it? Walter Nebuchar, bless his heart, wasn't exactly kicking down doors. He was the quiet brains behind the badge, the kind of guy more comfortable with a keyboard than a K-car. But then he conjured something extraordinary: Automan, a crime-fighting hologram pulled right out of the circuits. And this wasn't some fuzzy projection. Automan was real, solid, shimmering with blue light. Remember that incredible glowing suit? He could walk among us, possess impossible strength, and get this whip-up glowing. Angular vehicles like that unforgettable Lamborghini Countach lookalike or a helicopter, all seemingly woven from light and data streams. It was pure, unadulterated 80s techno-optimism poured onto the screen. And who could forget Cursor, that cheeky little ball of light zipping around, guiding Automan's creations. Out of this world. Imagine being a teenager and navigating high school, crushes, and homework, and also discovering you're half alien with superpowers bestowed by your dad, who lives on another planet and communicates through a crystal cube. That was Evie Garland's reality in Out of This World, played with infectious charm by Maureen Flanagan. Evie could freeze time just by touching her index fingers together, a power every single one of us wished we had at some point. Right? Admit it. She could also gleep objects, teleport them, and chat with her alien dad, Troy, voiced by Burt Reynolds, through that glowing crystal. The show perfectly captured that blend of typical teenage angst and extraordinary sci-fi fun. Evie's powers often created more problems than they solved, leading to comical mishaps and heartwarming lessons about responsibility and growing up. It balanced the fantasy elements with relatable family dynamics and friendships. Running for 4 seasons, it carved out a special place in the after-school lineup for many kids. Riptide. Sun, surf, speedboats, and a robot. Riptide had a unique formula that felt perfectly Californian 80s. Forget gritty PI. Offices, Cody Allen, Perry King, and Nick Ryder, Joe Penny, ran their detective agency from Cody's sleek yacht, the Riptide, docked in King Harbor. They were the handsome, charismatic muscle, the Vietnam vet buddies bringing street smarts and charm to the cases. But the secret weapon was Murray Boz Bozinski, Tom Bray, the nerdy, lovable tech genius who operated out of the back room, surrounded by computers and gadgets. And his greatest creation? The Roboz, a quirky, orange robot that often stole the scenes, assisting in investigations in its own clunky way. Riptide blended classic detective work with high-tech flair, think surveillance drones, before they were common, souped-up helicopters, and Boz's constant stream of innovative, sometimes glitchy, inventions. It had action, witty banter between the leads, and that sunny coastal setting. It felt a bit lighter than Magnum, PI, maybe, but just as entertaining in its own tech-infused way. Tales of the Gold Monkey. Step back into the late 1930s, a world brimming with exotic locales, daring pilots, hidden treasures, and shadowy spies. Tales of the Gold Monkey perfectly captured the pulp adventure spirit, feeling like a weekly dose of Indiana Jones set in the South Pacific. Stephen Collins starred as Jake Cutter, a charismatic American cargo pilot flying his trusty Grumman-Goose seaplane, the Cutter's Goose. Operating out of the fictional Baragara Islands, Jake constantly found himself embroiled in adventures involving Nazis, Japanese agents, ancient artifacts, and damsels in distress. He wasn't alone. He had his loyal, one-eyed Jack Russell Terrier, Jack, who famously barked once for no and twice for yes, his grumpy but reliable mechanic Corky, Jeff M.A.K, and the alluring American spy posing as a lounge singer, Sarah Stickney White, Caitlin O'Heaney. The show radiated charm, adventure, and a nostalgic yearning for a bygone era of romantic escapism. Misfits of Science. Here was a show that embraced the weird and wore it like a badge of honor. Misfits of Science felt like a comic book brought to life, but with a distinctly quirky, almost nonchalant 80s vibe. Forget capes and secret lairs. This was about a group of human anomalies studied at the less-than-glamorous Humanityne Institute. We had Dr. Billy Hayes, the leader figure without powers, Dr. Elvin Lincoln, who could shrink down to doll size, Johnny Bukowski, a rock and roller turned human lightning rod, remember those bolts shooting from his fingers? And Gloria Dinallo, the telekinetic teenager. And yes, a very young Courtney Cox was part of that crew. They weren't exactly the Avengers. They were oddballs, often stumbling into strange situations and using their bizarre powers in hilariously imperfect ways. The charm was in its refusal to take itself too seriously. It blended sci-fi concepts with genuine humor and a likable ensemble cast. It felt fun, lighthearted, and perfectly content being delightfully strange. The Powers of Matthew Starr. Teenage angst meets intergalactic destiny that was the potent mix fueling the powers of Matthew Starr. Peter Barton played Matthew, seemingly just another high school student, but secretly Elon, the prince of the planet Quadris, hiding on Earth with his guardian, Walt Shepard, the always commanding Louis Gossett Jr. Matthew possessed incredible powers, telekinesis, astral projection, transmutation abilities he had to master while dodging assassins sent by the rulers who conquered his homeworld. The show tapped directly into that adolescent fantasy of being special, of having hidden depths and extraordinary potential beneath a normal facade. Balancing schoolwork, friendships, and trying not to accidentally levitate the cafeteria trays made for compelling viewing. There was genuine drama and stakes involved, especially with Gossett Jr., grounding the sci-fi elements with his gravitas. Unfortunately, production issues, including an injury to Gossett Jr., hampered the show, and it only lasted a single season. Manimal. Talk about a high concept. Dr. Jonathan Jayce. Wealthy, sophisticated, expert in criminology. And oh yeah, he could transform into any animal he chooses. Manimal was pure, unadulterated pulp fantasy brought to the small screen. Played with suave charm by Simon McCorkindale, Jayce would use his shape-shifting abilities to fight crime, becoming a panther to stalk villains in the shadows, an eagle to soar above the city, or a hawk for reconnaissance. The transformation sequences, particularly the panther morph featuring Stan Winston's groundbreaking practical effects, were the undeniable centerpiece. Watching the rippling skin, the emerging claws, the changing facial structure, it was ambitious, maybe a little unsettling, but absolutely mesmerizing for 1983 television. It was a procedural crime show wrapped in an utterly fantastical premise. Critics often scoffed, and audiences, perhaps baffled, didn't tune in droves. Lasting only 8 episodes, Manimal became almost legendary for its short lifespan and audacious concept. Yet, who could forget the image of a man turning into a Black Panther? Sectaurs. Warriors of Symbion wasn't your typical space opera or medieval quest. It was something else entirely. Imagine a world where evolution took a sharp turn, leading humans to form telepathic bonds with giant, mutated insects. Prince Dargan and his allies, riding their colossal spider and beetle steeds, defended their shining kingdom against the genuinely creepy General Spydrax and his Dark Domain forces. The world-building felt surprisingly intricate for a show tied into an action figure line. Remember the toys? They often came with those hand-puppet insect companions. The designs were striking insectoid warriors, chitinous armor, buzzing vehicles. It felt imaginative, almost like stepping into a completely alien ecosystem brought to life through animation. Though its television life was tragically short, just a 5-episode miniseries, Sectaurs carved out a distinct niche. The Highwayman. Imagine the desolate beauty of the open road, a lone figure fighting for justice, not on horseback, but behind the wheel of a technologically advanced, heavily armed 18-wheeler. That was the Highwayman, set in a near-future America where traditional law enforcement struggled. The series starred Sam Jones, yes, Flash Gordon himself, as the titular enigmatic federal marshal known only as Highwayman. His rig wasn't just a truck, it was a mobile command center, capable of deploying a futuristic helicopter from its trailer and bristling with hidden gadgets and weapons. It felt like a blend of Mad Max's post-apocalyptic grit, Knight Rider's talking car tech, though the truck didn't talk, thankfully, in classic Western lone hero mythology. There is a rugged, almost dystopian feel to the world, and Highwayman operated outside the usual rules, bringing justice to the lawless frontiers of this imagined future. Despite lasting only 9 episodes plus the pilot movie, its unique fusion of genres left a mark on those seeking high-octane, slightly offbeat adventure. Turbo Teen. Oh, the high concepts of 80s cartoons. Turbo Teen, where do we even begin? Young Brett Matthews has a run-in with a top-secret government ray, because of course he does, and bam. Suddenly, extreme heat triggers a transformation not into some muscle-bound hero, but into a sleek, cherry red sports car. Can you just picture the pitch meeting for that one? He's a teen, but he's also a car. Yet, somehow it worked, didn't it? At least for those 13 glorious, slightly bizarre episodes. We watched Brett wrestle with this utterly unique predicament, the thrill of roaring down the highway 1 minute, the sheer awkward panic of turning back into a half-naked teenager in traffic the next. It tapped into that universal teen feeling of your body doing weird, uncontrollable things, just magnified to an absurd automotive degree. The animation style, that classic Saturday morning feel, the sheer audacity of the premise, it's pure, unfiltered 80s cartoon fodder. Street Hawk. Before the Dark Knight patrolled on two wheels, there was Street Hawk. Jesse M.A.S.K, Rex Smith, an ex-motorcycle cop injured in the line of duty, was secretly recruited for a government project. The star? A cutting-edge, all-terrain attack motorcycle capable of incredible speeds, remember hyperthrust? And armed with lasers and machine guns. Guided by the nerdy, behind-the-scenes tech expert Norman Tuttle, Joe Regalbuto, Jesse became the test pilot and clandestine crime fighter Street Hawk. Operating under the cover of night, the show offered high-octane thrills, cool gadgets, and the fantasy of a lone rider using technology to bring justice. It was the two-wheeled answer to Knight Rider, focusing more on visceral action and stunt work, lasting only one season but leaving a distinct impression with its sleek black bike. The Edison Twins. Science wasn't just for stuffy labs. It was a tool for adventure. That was the core message of the Edison Twins, a Canadian show popular throughout the 80s. Following the brilliant teenage twins Tom, Andrew Sabiston, and Annie Edison, Marnie McPhail, along with their younger brother Paul, Sonny Bays and Thrasher, the series presented everyday mysteries or problems that the siblings solved using scientific principles. Whether it was figuring out a neighborhood puzzle, exposing a hoax, or building a clever gadget, their ingenuity was always front and center. But what made it truly unique was the short animated segment at the end of each episode, clearly explaining the scientific concept. They had used physics, chemistry, biology, making learning feel like part of the fun. It encouraged critical thinking and made science feel accessible and exciting. Running for 6 seasons, it became a classroom staple for many and proved that educational programming could also be genuinely entertaining. Jayce and the Wheeled Warriors. Enter the realm of syndicated animation, where epic battles raged across the galaxy every afternoon. Jayce and the Wheeled Warriors had all the hallmarks of a great 80s action cartoon. A determined young hero, a truly menacing villain, cool transforming vehicles, and a quest of cosmic proportions. Jayce, guided by the wizard Jillian, sought his father Audric, a scientist who accidentally created the evil monster minds, sentient plant creatures led by the menacing Saw boss, who could transform into armed vehicles. To combat them, Jayce led the Lightning League, piloting incredible white and gold vehicles that could also transform. Remember Ewan, the little eternal squire? Or Herc Storm Sailor, the gruff but lovable mercenary? The show had a sweeping, almost mythological feel, with Jayce carrying half of a magic root, searching for his father who held the other half, the key to destroying the monster minds. The animation was dynamic, the vehicle designs were imaginative, and the driving synth score by Shuki Levy was unforgettable. The Phoenix. Remember the quiet intensity of Judson Scott as Bennu? The Phoenix felt different, more mysterious than many other sci-fi offerings of the time. It wasn't about space battles or laser guns, but about an ancient alien Bennu of the Golden Light, awakened from a long slumber beneath the earth. Suddenly, this powerful being with abilities like telekinesis, telepathy, levitation, and even healing found himself navigating the complexities and dangers of the modern, early 80s world. There's a sense of awe surrounding him, a feeling that he possessed knowledge and power far beyond our comprehension. The show blended this almost mystical element with espionage and adventure as Bennu tried to understand his purpose while evading those who sought to exploit or destroy him. It had a more thoughtful, atmospheric quality. exploring themes of potential, ancient wisdom meeting modern chaos, and the loneliness of being unique. Danger Bay. Against the stunning backdrop of coastal British Columbia, Danger Bay offered something different: adventure with a conscience. The show centered on the Roberts family. Dr. Grant Doc Roberts Donnelly Rhodes, a marine biologist and veterinarian at the Vancouver Aquarium, and his children, Nicole Ocean Hellman and Jonah Christopher Crab. Their lives were a mix of typical family dynamics and thrilling encounters related to wildlife rescue, environmental protection, and conservation efforts. What made Danger Bay stand out was its genuine commitment to educating viewers, particularly younger ones, about marine ecosystems, endangered species, and the impact of pollution, all wrapped up in engaging, often suspenseful, weekly stories. It wasn't preachy. It seamlessly integrated these important themes into the action and character development. Running for 6 seasons, it proved that television could be both entertaining and thoughtfully educational, fostering an appreciation for the natural world in many of us who watched. Voyagers. Green Light Kid. If you heard those words, you knew you were in for an adventure through time. Voyagers was a wonderfully clever and engaging series starring John Eric Hexum as Phineas Bogg, a member of a society of time travelers dedicated to correcting history's mistakes. When his Omni, the pocket watch-like time device, malfunctioned, he accidentally landed in 1982 and teamed up with Jeffrey Jones, Mino Palouse, a young orphan who, crucially, knew his history. Bogg was charismatic but often clueless about the specific historical details, relying on Jeffrey's knowledge to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Each week, they'd tumble into a different era: ancient Egypt, the Wild West, revolutionary France, meeting famous figures like Cleopatra, Billy the Kid, or Thomas Edison. It was pure escapism mixed with a genuinely fun history lesson. The chemistry between Hexum and Palouse was fantastic, and the premise allowed for endless variety. Sadly, despite critical acclaim and a loyal fan base, high production costs and perhaps unfortunate scheduling led to its cancellation after just 1 season. Space Academy. Long before Hogwarts, there was Space Academy. Airing in the late 70s, but often rerun well into the 80s, this Filmation classic captured the imaginations of kids dreaming of the final frontier. Set far in the future, the year 3732, the show followed the adventures of gifted young cadets training at an interstellar academy nestled on an asteroid. Under the wise and calm guidance of Commander Isaac Gampu, Jonathan Harris, instantly recognizable as Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, but playing a much kinder character here. These diverse students tackled cosmic phenomena, encountered alien life forms, and learned crucial lessons about teamwork, leadership, and ethical decision-making. Remember the Seeker, their spacecraft? Or Loki, the mischievous cadet with unique abilities? Space Academy blended futuristic sci-fi gadgets and space exploration with character-driven stories that often carried a moral message. M.A.S.K. Masked Crusaders working overtime, fighting crime. That theme song instantly brings it all back, doesn't it? M.A.S.K, Mobile Armored Strike Command, felt like the perfect synthesis of G.I. Joe's team dynamics and Transformers' vehicle transformations, but with its own unique twist. The Masks. Led by the resourceful Matt Tracker, M.A.S.K battled the nefarious Venom, vicious evil network of mayhem, headed by the treacherous Miles Mayhem. The core appeal was undeniably the vehicles, ordinary-looking cars, trucks, and motorcycles that transformed into heavily armed assault machines. Thunderhawk, Tracker's red Camaro, becoming a gull-winged fighter jet, is an iconic image. But adding another layer were the masks themselves, each granting its wearer a specific power, shooting lasers, creating sonic waves, generating illusions. It added a strategic element to the action. The accompanying toy line was wildly popular, letting us recreate those battles on the living room carpet. Though the series only ran for 2 seasons, M.A.S.K's blend of cool characters, transforming vehicles, and powered helmets cemented its status as a beloved 80s action staple. Kids Incorporated. Remember that feeling after school? Switching on the TV and diving into a world of music, friendship, and youthful energy? Kids Incorporated tapped right into that vibe. Set a local music spot called The Place, later The Sunset. The show revolved around a group of kids and teenagers who performed contemporary pop hits as their own band. It wasn't just about the music, though. Each episode wove in storylines dealing with typical kid and teen issues, friendship troubles, school pressures, family situations, learning life lessons. The musical performances were the highlight, essentially creating mini music videos within the show, featuring covers of popular songs of the day. It felt vibrant, current, and aspirational, running for an impressive 9 seasons. From the mid-'80s well into the '90s, it became a launching pad for future stars like Martika, Fergie, Stacey Ferguson, Jennifer Love Hewitt, and Mario Lopez. M.A.K.'s Headroom, the series. Beyond the pop culture ubiquity of the stuttering, witty AI VJ, M.A.K.'s Headroom also starred in his own surprisingly dark and intelligent cyberpunk series. Set 20 minutes into the future, it depicted a world dominated by monolithic television networks locked in brutal ratings wars. Matt Frewer played both the charismatic AI Max and his human counterpart, investigative reporter Edison Carter of Network 23. Carter relentlessly pursued stories exposing corporate corruption and societal decay, often aided, and sometimes hindered, by his computer-generated alter ego. The show offered sharp satire, prescient commentary on media manipulation and technology's reach, and a unique visual style. Critically acclaimed, but perhaps too ahead of its time for a wide audience, it remains a cult classic of thoughtful, dystopian sci-fi. The Wizard. In a truly unique premise, The Wizard starred David Rappaport as Simon M.A.K., a brilliant inventor and humanitarian who happened to be a little person, constantly sought after by nefarious forces wanting to exploit his genius for weapons development. Simon dedicated his life to creating whimsical, ingenious inventions for peaceful purposes: toys, gadgets for the disabled, and tools for humanitarian aid. He was protected by the suave government agent Alex Jagger, Douglas Barr, and looked after by his pragmatic longtime friend, Tilly Russell, Fran Ryan. Each episode saw Simon using his intellect and inventions to solve problems, help those in need, and evade capture, blending adventure, espionage, and heartwarming moments. It was a charming show notable for its positive representation and focus on ingenuity over violence. My Secret Identity. Capturing the lighter side of superpowers, My Secret Identity starred young Jerry O'Connell as Andrew Clements, a typical teenager who accidentally gains extraordinary abilities after being zapped by a scientist friend's experimental photon beam. Suddenly, Andrew could fly, initially needing aerosol cans for propulsion, move at super speed, and possessed invulnerability. With the help of his scientist neighbor, Dr. Benjamin Jeffcoat, Derek McGrath, Andrew tried to navigate adolescence while learning to control his powers and use them for good, often tackling relatively low-stakes problems like bullies, school dilemmas, or neighborhood mishaps rather than supervillains. The show had a sunny, optimistic tone, focusing on the fun and challenges of having powers in an everyday setting, making it a relatable and enjoyable staple for many young viewers over its 3 seasons. The series. Following the phenomenal success of the 2 original miniseries, V launched as a weekly series, continuing the struggle between the human resistance and the seemingly benevolent, but secretly reptilian alien visitors. While the initial miniseries focused on the shock of discovery and the formation of the resistance, The series delved into the ongoing guerrilla war, week-to-week battles, and the complex interpersonal dramas among key characters like Mike Donovan, Mark Singer, Julie Parrish, Faye Grant, and the deliciously evil visitor leader Diana, Jane Badler. Though it faced budget constraints and perhaps struggled to maintain the event-level intensity of the miniseries over its single season, it offered fans continued adventures in its sci-fi world, exploring themes of collaboration, betrayal, and hope against overwhelming alien occupation. Forgotten 80s tasks that took forever. Ever hear folks call the 80s simpler times? Makes you chuckle, right? Because while maybe less complicated, life sure demanded more patience. Remember wrestling with a manual car window during a surprise shower? Or the sheer dedication it took to record a killer mixtape off the radio? These everyday things were work, but we didn't complain. Join us as we dive into those time-sucking tasks the 80s made us master. We're revisiting the forgotten habits and everyday hassles of the world before everything went digital. Looking back, some of that normal stuff feels downright bizarre now. Let's get started. Rotary phone realities. For many of us growing up before the digital floodgates opened, the landline phone wasn't just useful, it was essential. Long before cell phones tucked into every pocket, we actually had to remember phone numbers, or at least the important ones. Family, your best friend, the local pizza joint, those were committed to memory. For less frequent calls, you had that little spiral-bound address book, probably with half the entries crossed out and rewritten, stashed near the phone. And for everything else, the mighty phone book. That thick, yellow-page tome listed practically everyone and every business in town. Finding a number meant flipping through page after page, scanning tiny print. No quick searches here. Then came the dialing itself, especially with a rotary phone. You'd stick your finger in the hole, pull the dial all the way around to the stop, let it whir back repeat for every single digit. Make a mistake halfway through? Hang up, take a breath, and start the whole sequence over. Trying to win a radio call-in contest with a rotary was a fool's errand against the lightning speed of push-button dialing. But those old phones, they were practically indestructible. Connecting with people took time, and so did consuming our entertainment, especially when everyone watched together. The video store quest. VCRs started trickling out in the 70s, but it was really the mid-1980s when they became a fixture in seemingly every living room. Suddenly, movie night wasn't restricted to whatever the networks decided to air or a trip to the multiplex. You could actually rent a movie and watch it on your schedule. The movie industry initially freaked out, worried this would kill theaters, but for us regular folks, it was revolutionary. Of course, renting wasn't quite the seamless experience of browsing Netflix today. It meant a pilgrimage to the local video rental store, which was an experience in itself. You'd spend ages wandering the aisles, physically picking up those chunky VHS boxes, reading the often dramatic summaries on the back, debating choices with family or friends. Have you seen this one? Is it scary? It was a whole social ritual, especially on a Friday or Saturday night. And once you finally made your selection, your responsibility wasn't over. You had to remember to rewind the tape before returning it. Hence those ubiquitous stickers: be kind, rewind. Forget, and you might face a small fine, adding insult to the injury of potential late fees if you missed the return deadline. While VCRs brought movies home, another piece of noisy technology was busy printing things out in homes and offices. Firing up the Commodore. If you were tapping away on a computer back in the 80s, particularly the beloved Commodore 64, you learned early on that gaming came with a healthy dose of waiting. It wasn't like today where you just poke an icon and boom, you're in. Oh no, launching a game was practically a ceremony. Power on, get that bright blue screen with the blinking cursor staring back at you. Then, the incantation, carefully typing load *8, one hit that enter key. And you waited, maybe crossed your fingers. If the computer god smiled and gave you that sweet ready prompt, you weren't done yet. Type run, hit enter again. And then, yep, more waiting. No fancy graphics showing progress, Just hope, and maybe the whirring of the disk drive. Make one typo in that command. Sorry, Charlie, start the whole ritual over. Kids today would probably short-circuit just thinking about it. But for us, it was just how it was. And when that game finally loaded, man, that victory felt earned. That kind of patience extended beyond just computers. Even our music required a different kind of manual effort. Antenna acrobatics. Long before cable snaked its way into every neighborhood, and light years before streaming was even a concept, watching TV meant dealing with the antenna. Whether you had the classic rabbit ears sitting precariously on top of the set or a larger metal contraption bolted to your roof, getting a decent picture was often a challenge. Reception could be finicky, to say the least. If the screen turned into a blizzard of static, it became an all-hands-on-deck situation. Someone, usually the youngest, had to carefully adjust the rabbit ears a little left, a little higher, maybe point one towards the window. Sometimes, in moments of true desperation, out came the aluminum foil, carefully wrapped around the tips in a folk-tech attempt to boost the signal. It felt silly, but hey, sometimes it worked. If you were lucky enough to have a rooftop antenna, reception was generally better, but adjusting that often involved a somewhat perilous climb onto the roof. A few fancy setups had motorized rotators you could adjust with a dial indoors, but that was living large. Then cable arrived, promising perfect picture for a monthly fee, of course. Suddenly, antenna adjustments became a nostalgic memory, much like the way we used to connect with people over the phone required its own kind of deliberate action. Answering machine antics. Back in the pre-voicemail dark ages of the 1980s, if you weren't physically present to answer the phone, your only hope of not missing out was the trusty answering machine. These little boxes, usually running on mini or standard cassette tapes, became household staples. But they weren't just functional. Setting up your outgoing greeting was a form of self-expression. Would you be brief and businesslike? Please leave a message after the beep. Or would you inject some personality, a bad joke, maybe some background music? If you were going on vacation, you might record a special message letting callers know, especially crucial if people needed to reach you for work. As handy as they were, they had their frustrations. Most kicked in after 4 or 5 rings, so you'd patiently wait, listen to the entire greeting, only to sometimes be met with the dreaded electronic voice saying, "Memory full. Please call again later." ARC. Listening back was also a linear affair. No skipping bad messages. You had to listen through or try to fast forward and guess where the next message began. And then, you had to manually rewind the tape to erase old messages and make room for new ones. Quite the chore. Dealing with limited tape storage was one challenge, but managing data on early computer disks presented its own set of hurdles. The floppy disk shuffle. If you ever relied on those classic 5 1/4-inch floppy disks for computer storage back in the day, you learned one thing fast. You needed a lot of them. These thin, genuinely floppy squares were how we loaded software and saved our precious documents, but their storage capacity was laughably tiny by modern measures. A standard double-sided, double-density disk held about 360 kilobytes. That's barely enough space for a single decent quality photo today. If you splurge for the high-density versions later on, you got a comparatively massive 1.2 megabytes, which still filled up incredibly quickly. This limitation meant saving anything complex was a multi-disk affair. Installing a big program might require swapping disks in and out multiple times. Saving your own work often meant spreading files across several labeled floppies. Organization wasn't just helpful, it was mandatory, with handwritten labels being your only guide. And these disks were delicate. A scratch from dust, getting bent in a backpack, even being near a telephone receiver's magnet could scramble your data instantly. Compared to today's terabyte drives and cloud storage, it was digital life on hard mode. Just like navigating file systems required care, navigating the actual roads demanded a different, very physical, tool. What's one time-consuming task from the 80s that you remember struggling with the most? The manual window workout. See a few raindrops starting to fall while you're driving today? Push a button. Were windows sealed? Simple. But back when power windows were often an optional extra, maybe only on fancy cars, sealing your car against a sudden downpour required physical exertion. You'd be cruising along, maybe with the radio up, windows down enjoying the breeze, and then the sky opens up. Instant panic. You'd grab that window crank handle and start spinning it like your life depended on it, trying desperately to close the gap before the upholstery, and you got drenched. If you had passengers, it was every person for themselves, frantically cranking their own window. Getting caught at a traffic light during a cloudburst was the worst. No effortless electric motors here, just pure arm power and speed. And while we're on the subject of 80s car interiors, who remembers the way back of the station wagon? That glorious, often rear-facing, seatbelt optional zone where kids just tumbled in? Simpler times, maybe, but definitely different safety standards. Kids today miss the window crank cardio. That reliance on physical action extended to how we connected with people, often requiring us to stay put. Appointment television. It seems almost quaint now, but there was a time when watching television was a shared event, everyone tuning in at the exact same moment to see the same show unfold live. This was the era before DVRs let us spend time, before streaming services offered endless choices, even before VCRs were commonplace enough for everyone to record things. If your favorite sitcom or drama was on Tuesday at 9 p.m., you parked yourself in front of the tube at 9 p.m. Period. No showing up late, no hitting pause for a snack, no rewinding if you missed a crucial line. You were locked in. And then there were the commercials. You couldn't skip them, couldn't fast forward. You just watched them. Some were iconic, their jingles burrowing into our brains forever. But let's be honest, the commercials served another vital purpose: the strategic break. The second those ads started, it was a mad dash to the bathroom, to the kitchen, trying to complete your mission before the show snapped back on. In a house with limited facilities, this could become a competitive sport. Soon enough, though, technology arrived that gave us a bit more control over when we watched our shows and movies. Tag a friend who would totally remember these 80s time wasters. Crafting the perfect mixtape. When someone today talks about making a mixtape for their friend, they usually mean dragging some digital files into a playlist quick, easy, done in minutes. And that's cool, but forgive us old-timers for chuckling a bit. Because making an actual mixtape on a cassette back in the 80s, that wasn't just selecting songs. It was an art form, a test of patience, timing, and sometimes sheer luck. Often, the best way to get songs you didn't own was recording them off the radio. This meant hours spent hovering near the stereo or boombox, cassette deck ready, finger poised over the record button, waiting for that killer track to finally play. When it started, you had to punch record immediately, praying the DJ wouldn't start yakking over the intro or, worse, the fade out. Mess up the timing or get DJ chatter. Too bad. Try again tomorrow, maybe? You repeated this meticulous process, song by painstaking song, until you'd filled 60 or 90 minutes with your hand-picked gems. It was slow, often frustrating, but the sheer effort involved made gifting or receiving a mixtape feel incredibly personal and special. That kind of careful attention was sometimes forgotten in other areas, leading to different kinds of 80s frustrations, like dealing with your car. Mastering the roadmap. Before our phones started politely telling us exactly when and where to turn, navigating unfamiliar territory involved a bit more engagement. You either winged it, relying on street signs and landmarks, or you unfolded a physical roadmap. If you chose the map route, trying to consult it while driving solo was a recipe for disaster. By the time you got that big sheet unfolded, it was probably obscuring your view of the speedometer, maybe even half the windshield. Following your progress in real time was tricky, so you often had to pull over or memorize chunks of the route. Okay, take Highway 10 for 5 miles, then look for the exit for Elm Street. Many of us resorted to scribbling down simplified turn-by-turn directions on a scrap of paper beforehand. The passenger often became the official navigator, tasked with map-reading duties. And perhaps the most universally frustrating part? Trying to fold the map back up correctly along its original creases. It felt like wrestling an octopus, often ending with a crumpled mess stuffed haphazardly into the glove compartment. GPS definitely lowered the blood pressure on road trips. Those maps were just one example of the physical objects we relied on heavily before everything went digital, especially when it came to our entertainment collections. The dead battery blues. Modern cars are packed with helpful features: headlights that turn off automatically, warning chimes if you leave them on, battery saver modes. It's hard to accidentally drain your battery these days. But cast your mind back to the average car in the 1980s. Forgetting to switch off your headlights after parking was an incredibly common and deeply frustrating mistake. You'd come out in the morning, maybe running late for work or school, turn the key, and instead of the engine roaring to life, you'd hear that sickening, slow click, 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 dead battery. Maybe you got home exhausted and just forgot. Or perhaps you lingered a little too long at a scenic viewpoint with the radio playing. Either way, the result was the same. You weren't going anywhere easily. Your options were limited. Find a kind soul with jumper cables, and hope one of you knew how to connect them correctly. Call for an expensive tow truck, or, if you had a manual transmission and some strong friends, or a convenient hill, attempt a push start. It was a rite of passage almost everyone endured at least once. Just as finding a jump start could be frantic, finding the right thing on TV could sometimes feel like a race against time. What's something from the 80s you still refuse to give up, even with modern alternatives? The dot matrix symphony. If you spent any time near a computer or even a cash register in the 80s or early 90s, you're familiar with the soundtrack, that high-pitched, grinding, zipping noise of a dot matrix printer hard at work. Maybe you had one at home connected to your Apple IIe, or used one in the school computer lab, or just got receipts printed on that unique paper. It was everywhere. These printers used continuous sheets of paper with perforated holes running down both sides, which engaged with sprockets to feed the paper through tractor feed, they called it. Printing anything involved that unmistakable mechanical racket filling the room. And when the printing was done, there was one last crucial and strangely satisfying step: carefully tearing off those hole-punched strips along the edges. It felt like a necessary part of the process, cleaning up the document. But did we just toss those strips? Heck no. Admit it, you probably folded them into little zigzagging accordions, or rolled them into tiny caterpillars, or just fiddled with them endlessly. Surely I wasn't the only one doing that. That mechanical sound was distinct, much like the whirring and clicking of another communication device that relied on tape. Channel surfing purgatory. Finding something to watch now involves scrolling through a slick on-screen guide, or just telling your remote what you want. Easy peasy. But remember the early days of cable television? Finding a specific channel, like the all-important MTV, often felt like navigating a maze blindfolded. There was no interactive guide, no search bar. You had that chunky cable box, often connected by a thick wire with numbered buttons. Finding channel 28 meant clicking up, 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 or maybe punching in 2 then 8. And if something huge was about to premiere, say, a blockbuster music video like Michael Jackson's Thriller, the pressure was intense. You had to be on the right channel at the right moment. If you couldn't remember if MTV was channel 28 or 32, you'd be frantically clicking, hoping you didn't overshoot it and land on the home shopping network while history was being made elsewhere. Go past it. Frantically click back down, praying you hadn't missed the opening seconds. It was high-stakes viewing compared to today's easily navigable, time-shifted world. That feeling of manual control, or lack thereof, extended to features inside our cars too. The physical media parade. Looking back, the evolution of how we watched movies and listened to music at home is just wild. If you wanted a movie in the early days, you might have invested in beta tapes, remember those? Only to see VHS swoop in and completely dominate the market. Then there was the brief, fascinating era of the Laserdisc, those giant, silvery discs that offered better quality but never quite hit the mainstream. A lot of folks skipped that pricey format altogether and waited for the next big thing, the digital versatile disc or DVD. Building these collections wasn't just about entertainment. It was a serious investment. We spent good money on tapes and discs, not to mention the dedicated racks, shelves, and towering cabinets needed to organize them all. And how many of us bought the exact same movie multiple times? You got your favorite action flick on VHS, then upgraded to the sharper DVD version years later, and maybe even shelled out again for the high-definition Blu-ray. It felt like a never-ending cycle of repurchasing. Now, streaming offers almost everything instantly, making those shelves of plastic seem almost archaic. Still hard to toss those nostalgic VHS tapes though, even if the scratch-prone DVDs went first. While home media evolved, taking our music on the go presented its own set of power challenges. The waiting game by the phone. Before the instant gratification of texting, DMs, and knowing exactly when someone saw your message, expecting a phone call was an exercise in pure, unadulterated waiting. If you made plans, if you had a crush who might call, if a friend promised to phone back, you had to physically position yourself within earshot of the landline phone and wait. There was no taking the call with you to another room or outside. You were tethered. Leaving the vicinity for even a quick bathroom break felt risky. What if that was the exact moment they called? And the special kind of torture that was the busy signal. If you called them and heard that rapid beep beep beep, you had absolutely no idea when they might hang up. Could be 2 minutes, could be an hour. No call waiting to barge in, no voicemail to leave a quick message, unless they had splurged on an answering machine, which wasn't universal. Think of the collective hours teens spent in the 80s just staring at the phone, occasionally picking it up to check for a dial tone, hoping, waiting. Patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a necessity. All this waiting and juggling separate communication methods highlights just how many individual tools we needed before technology bundled everything together. Powering the boombox. These days, keeping our gadgets juiced up is usually as simple as plugging in a USB cable for a while. Rechargeable lithium-ion batteries are miracles of convenience. But back in the glorious era of the boombox, taking your music truly portable meant stocking up on batteries, specifically those big, heavy D cells. Boomboxes were the undisputed kings of portable sound in the 80s and early 90s, letting us blast cassette tapes or radio stations wherever we gathered. But man, were they power-hungry beasts. Depending on the size and features, your boombox might demand 6, 8, or even a whopping 10D batteries. And those things weren't cheap. Plus, they seemed to drain incredibly fast, especially if you were hitting rewind and fast forward a lot trying to find songs or make mixtapes. Running out of juice mid-song was a party foul. And the frustration if you accidentally bought C batteries instead of D? Ugh, you'd better hope the corner store was still open. We must have spent a small fortune feeding those things, and carrying spares just added to the already substantial weight. Today's featherlight Bluetooth speakers make those battery burdens seem prehistoric. Keeping those portable tunes playing required constant battery management, just like keeping track of time itself involved more manual intervention back then. What's one thing you used to do in the 80s that today's kids would never understand? Managing pre-digital photography and photo albums. While the article touches on physical media like VHS, it misses the entire time-consuming ritual surrounding personal photography before digital cameras and smartphones. In the 80s, capturing memories meant buying rolls of film, typically offering only 24 or 36 exposures. Each shot was a commitment. You couldn't preview it, delete mistakes, or instantly share it. Careful consideration was needed for each picture, knowing film and development weren't free. Once you finished a precious roll, the real patience test began. You'd take the canister to a drugstore or photo lab, then wait often for several days, sometimes up to a week for the film to be developed. There was always a sense of anticipation mixed with anxiety. Would the pictures turn out? Did anyone blink? Finally, you'd pick up an envelope containing your glossy prints, often with mandatory duplicates and the negatives. Then came the task of sorting through them, discarding the blurry or badly composed ones, and meticulously organizing the keepers into physical photo albums. This often involved carefully sliding photos behind plastic sheets or using adhesive corners, sometimes adding handwritten captions. Compared to today's instant digital gratification and cloud storage, 80s photography required significant time, money, and manual effort from capture to curation. The watch winder's ritual. Today, if someone needs the time, they almost reflexively glance at their phone screen. Wristwatches certainly still exist, but for many, they're more about style than strict necessity. But go back a few decades, and having a reliable watch strapped to your wrist was absolutely crucial for navigating the day. Some of us even remember owning wind-up watches, marvelous little mechanical devices that didn't need batteries, but required a daily ritual. You had to remember to gently win the crown every morning or evening to keep it ticking. Forgetting meant your watch would simply stop. And even battery-powered watches required maintenance. If yours had a date window, it often didn't account for months shorter than 31 days, meaning you had to manually advance the date on the 1st of March, May, July, October, and December. And twice a year? Time for the daylight saving time adjustment forward in spring, back in fall. But how did we ensure our watches were accurate? No atomic clock signals syncing automatically. We dialed the phone number for the local time service. At the tone, the time will be. And carefully set not just our wristwatch, but usually the bedside alarm clock and the kitchen clock too. Manually adjusting time was one thing. Manually curating hours of music required a whole different level of dedication. Life before the smartphone. It's genuinely staggering to consider how many individual items we used to routinely carry or rely on that have now been completely absorbed into that single, sleek device in our pocket, the smartphone. Today, one gadget is our phone, clock, map, notepad, music player, address book, calculator, checkbook, mobile banking app, newspaper, camera, and video recorder, all rolled into one. But back in the 80s, getting through the day often meant juggling a whole collection of separate tools. You needed coins for a payphone if you were out and about. A wristwatch was essential for telling time. A folded paper map lived in the glove compartment for navigation. A small notebook and pen were for jotting things down. It sounds exhausting now, but back then, that collection of single-purpose items was just life. Thinking back on all these time-consuming tasks really makes you appreciate the conveniences we have today, doesn't it? The cassette tape shuffle. The 80s gave us some killer music, didn't it? It was also a time of musical transition. By 83 or so, those bulky 8-track tapes were fading fast. Compact discs were the shiny new future, but wow, were they expensive. CDs and players cost a pretty penny, so they weren't exactly standard issue yet. Plenty of us still spun vinyl, but if one format truly defined the decade's sound for the average person, it was the cassette tape. Those little plastic rectangles were pure magic, small enough to stash anywhere, tough enough to survive being tossed on the dashboard, and perfect for taking your tunes on the road. Cassettes were our constant companions, blasting from boomboxes on the corner, playing in the car stereo, or tucked into a Walkman for a private soundtrack. But finding that one song? It was an adventure. Side A or side B? Fast forward, rewind, stop, play, darn. Too far? And the ultimate tragedy, the tape getting hopelessly tangled in the player. Every music fan knew the fix. They'll grab the nearest pencil, carefully insert it into the spool, and patiently twist that ribbon back into place. Instant track access today feels like cheating. Of course, getting clear audio wasn't the only reception challenge we faced back then in our living rooms. So there we have it, a journey back through the static, rediscovering signals from shows that once lit up our screens. From holographic heroes and car-transforming teens to time travelers and alien princes, the 80s offered such a wild, imaginative tapestry of television. These weren't just shows, They were companions during formative years, sparks for playground games, snippets of theme songs humming in our heads. They remind us of a time filled with burgeoning technology, unique storytelling risks, and maybe a touch more optimistic weirdness. Though perhaps forgotten by the mainstream, their glow remains for those of us who were there. What memories did this trip unlock for you? Which of these lost signals resonates most strongly today? Let's keep sharing these stories, ensuring these echoes from the past aren't entirely lost to time.